Photoshop has become very prevalent in photographs today. However, people often forget that scenes can be changed when a photograph is taken as well. A few ways photographs can be altered are by changing the shutter speed, aperture, and focus of the camera. The shutter speed is the amount of time that the camera's shutter is open. The time that it is open determines the amount of time that the film or image sensor is exposed to light. In this photograph, the silver square is the shutter of the camera. Behind the shutter is the image sensor. By changing the shutter speed, you can either incorporate movement into a photo or completely stop the scene. Here, the photograph of a waterfall is shown at different shutter speeds. These are 1 1/3, 1/30th, 1/200th, and 1/800th of a second. As you can see, the streams become droplets as the shutter speed increases. Shutter speeds can also make a subject in your photo clearer or help it to stand out from the background. In this bicycle photograph, the camera was moved with the person to keep the subject clear but the background blurred. In this photograph of the subway, the subject stood still while the train moves past. A longer shutter speed was used to make the train blur and emphasize its movement in comparison to the still subject. The nighttime traffic photo also used a long shutter speed. This blurred the traffic and kept the non-moving objects clear, similar to the previous photo. The photo seems like it was taken at dawn because the longer shutter speed allowed more light to enter. This brightened the photograph overall. The next photo shows how these techniques can be used to change the way that a scene looks. When this photo was taken, the room was very dark, but using a longer shutter speed, more light was allowed to enter. This made it seem as if the room was well lit. The person on the couch also seems partially invisible. This is because a 2-second shutter speed was used and the person was only on the couch for half of it. Because of this, the photograph is actually half of the person sitting on the couch and half of just the couch. When changing the shutter speed, the aperture has to be changed as well to allow more light or less light into the photograph. This photograph is of the bike rack outside of Able. It was taken with a long shutter speed on a bright day. As the shutter speed is decreased, the subjects of the photo become more visible. This works the opposite way as well. In a dark scene with a fast shutter speed, it is hard to see anything at all, but by changing the shutter speed and aperture, you can make the scene perfectly clear. This drawing shows the correlation between the aperture and the shutter speed. The black circle with a hole is the size of the aperture. The slice out of the red circle is the length of the shutter speed. As the hole becomes bigger, the shutter speed can become faster. This is because more light is allowed in from the aperture, keeping the overall amount of light the same. By changing the aperture, you can change the focus of the camera or the depth of field in the photograph. When you make the aperture larger, you increase the depth of field. When you decrease the aperture, you decrease the depth of field. The depth of field is the area in the photograph that is of acceptable clarity. The depth of field in this photo is the area in the middle where the letters are the clearest. In this photograph, the area that is in focus, or the depth of field, is the area shown. This is similar to a landscape photograph where you want the depth of field to about 1/3 of the way through the photo. In landscape photographs, you also want to have a large depth of field to bring more of the photo into focus. Therefore, a large or open aperture is needed. This will bring more of the photo into focus. Going to the opposite side of the spectrum, having a small depth of field or very near focus blurs everything but the subject in the depth of field. In the handlebar photo, the smallest depth of field was used. This depth of field was close to the camera and made the whole background blurry. A near depth of field was used for this picture of the flower as well. The depth of field can be extended away from the camera by using a bigger lens and projecting the depth of field away from the camera. In this picture, a far depth of field was used. This caused the near lava lamp to be blurred out, but the hallway to be clear. A near depth of field was used in this photo in order to bring the lava lamp into perspective. In doing so, the hallway was blurred because it is outside of the depth of field. Most cameras today have programs that adjust the camera to preset aperture and shutter speed. Examples of these preset settings are Auto, Sport, Micro, Landscape, Portrait, Sunset, Panoramic or Stitch, Snow, Firework, Underwater, Indoor, and Steady Shot. Auto is the basic setting. Here, the camera will use its best judgment to select the camera settings. Sport mode is used for photographing fast-moving objects. It attempts to freeze the action by increasing the shutter speed. Micro mode allows the photographer to move in closer to an object to take a close-up photo without the usual problem of blurriness. Micro mode also uses a smaller aperture and a slower shutter speed to help see the objects that are close up. Landscape mode takes large-scale photos. This is accomplished with a smaller aperture and a slower shutter speed. On top of these preset settings for your camera, you can also add filters or tints that will alter the look of the final product. Examples of these additional settings are black and white, sepia, negative, red, blue, and green tints. The black and white settings will turn the photo into a monochrome. The sepia setting is similar to how photographers would tint their monochrome photos with yellow dye. The negative filter will invert all of the colors in the photo, and the red, green, and blue tints tint the photo to that color. Newer cameras have programs that allow drastic changes to be made when the photo is taken. Facial recognition software finds people's faces in a photograph and outlines them. It then focuses the camera on the faces to allow for better portraits. Smile detectors use facial recognition to find faces as well. It then looks at the faces and tells you if they are smiling. Here you can see two cameras. One has a red dot to show that he is not smiling. Some of these cameras are advanced enough to take the picture as soon as everyone smiles. The slimming feature can make it look as if you were 10 pounds thinner instantly. The program does this by slimming the center and widening the outside of the photo to maintain perspective. Here is a photo of a picture taken with this camera. This is a good example of what this feature does. It is very distinguishable that the melon on the left is larger than the melon on the right. The type of camera that you use can also drastically change the photo. There are many different types of cameras that people use today. 3 types that we looked at are cell phones, consumer cameras, and DSLR cameras. These cameras cover the most common cameras that are used today. Here is the comparison of all of them. Though Photoshop is well known and used today, there are still many ways to modify pictures when they are taken. This shows that even though a photo is original, it may not be unaltered.